Hi everyone. I want to talk about comparative titles today because if you are trying to sell your book to a publisher, non-fiction book, whether that's a memoir or a self-help or a business book, knowing your comparative titles is such a key component of your book proposal, your synopsis, your query letter, and even writing your chapter outlines. And for me, it was absolutely essential to be able to write a book for that category. In my case, my two books were both memoirs, and my second memoir was a biography history hybrid. So it was a very complex structure, and I had a lot of difficulty getting super clear on that structure. And if you aren't clear on the structure, you won't be able to sell your book, okay? I think it's 95% of book proposals are rejected because it is not clear what the story is about or how it will sit in the current book landscape, the current publishing landscape. So before you go off and send that book proposal or your query or submission to anyone, you need to be so crystal clear on A, what your book is about, and B, where it's going to sit in the publishing market. So I wanted to give you an example of how your comparative titles work and why they are so important. And this is because when you are pitching a book, when you are selling a book, when a book is published, you're basically asking complete strangers to spend $30 to $40 in Australia. A new paperback book in Australia by a completely unknown author is sometimes $38. And this is a big ask. So if you don't show in every element of your book proposal where your book sits in the marketplace and that it is a proven category and how and where and how your story is going to differentiate from those proven comparative titles, you won't sell your book to a publisher or an agent, okay? Your query will be ignored and your proposal will be rejected. So I want to give you an example of a couple of comparative titles. If I were to be writing a memoir or a non-fiction or a blend on giving up alcohol, okay? Because two very, very similar titles were published and they both did really, really well. But if you take a look at these two memoir / non-fiction blends, academic journalism reportage, you, as I did, because I purchased both books, even though I had the other one, you will see how they differentiate. And this is why it's so important to understand and be a reader and go to bookshops and read books in the category in which you are pitching or proposing that you get published. So there is a memoir that came out in Australia called High Sobriety, and it was by a journalist, I think it was her first book actually, called Jill Stark, from a Scottish background. And the memoir was about her year not drinking alcohol. I think she was in her 30s, and so it was from that perspective of a woman in Australia not drinking alcohol. She wove a lot of really good statistical research and data and even informative reportage about where there wasn't any research into a woman's processing of alcohol and that sort of thing. So it had that element of research and information, but it was told from her perspective of going without alcohol. So it was a memoir, and people would describe it as a memoir because it was her personal narrative of that year without alcohol. Okay, so it's a really good example if you are trying to blend a memoir with a different, with say reportage or analytical data and statistic information. But the other reason I wanted to mention it is because I believe it sold really well. And another book came out a few years later with, so Jill Stark's book, I believe, was published by Scribe. And this other book came out with Bloomsbury from Simon & Schuster, one of their imprints, and it's called Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker. And again, it is a personal perspective of giving up alcohol, but it is almost written like a call to action. I've got it here. I had a copy of High Sobriety, but I think I lent it to someone. Anyway, if you were to pick up those books, they are very, very different, even though they both are about the same topic or theme, and told from a very similar perspective. White woman in 2020s, 2010s, I think, because they were published in 2013 and 2016, trying to give up alcohol. Whereas Quit Like a Woman takes a more political standpoint. It's almost like a call to action. She very much makes it very clear how alcohol has been marketed to women in similar ways that we've found that cigarettes were marketed and advertised to people as a status symbol. And so it has that slight difference from Jill Stark's book, which is also a personal narrative, also about giving up alcohol, also sharing some quite shocking information, data and facts interwoven in that chapter structure. But the tone is much more self-help / political, call to action in Holly Whitaker's book, and Jill Stark's is much more a personal account of the experiences, the feelings, the unexpected social situations that she was placed in. And so if I were to be pitching a book about giving up alcohol from a woman's perspective, these are two titles. Actually, I probably wouldn't use, yes, I would use Jill Stark's one because it was republished last year again. So it does fit in that recently published category, needs to be within 5 years. And they both did really, really well. So you want your comparative titles. The whole purpose of them is to prove that this topic, that this category has an audience, but you also want to be showing that you as a writer know where your style and your angle sits in differentiation to those already published titles, and what it offers as an extra, a new thing, a new hook in that angle, in that theme or topic of the other titles. So comparative titles are so important to your book proposal and even to writing the manuscript. I really needed to be super clear on my comparative titles to nut out the chapter structure for my second book, because it was a very complex structure. And as I said before, if a publisher and agent doesn't know what your story is about and they can't see it and where it sits in the marketplace, it will not be purchased. So you need to know your comparative titles, and you need to know exactly how they differ from your style. And I can't believe some writers actually say, oh no, nothing's been written on this before. I'm the very first person to ever write about this. That's why it's so amazing. That's not going to go down well if you pitch a book like that by saying, I'm the first one ever to approach this topic or theme. This is the most unique story that you've ever heard in your life. That just shows you haven't done the work to identify where it sits in the marketplace and where it is encompassing a relatable universal theme, okay? So you need to know your comparative titles to sell your book.